if we have the ability to know how a food is going to affect you, then you could potentially have food sources that you could print that would be directly tailored to your own nutritional and genetic needs. That you have a propensity for, this particular condition, or you do have this existing condition, and you get a food that's generated to be able to work with your body. Like, say you're lactose intolerant, that's the no-brainer. You have food that's no lactose, or I don't know, maybe we edit those genes in the future and we don't need to worry about that. But I definitely think tailored food, tailored medicine is a future thing that we would have on spaceships.
Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lawn, and each episode, I and a guest will unpack a fiction trope with an eye for character development and narrative structures. Make sure to look for Speculative Sandbox on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation. Leave comments or questions, or let us know what other tropes we should cover. When the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one.
This episode is brought to you by Stars. Lisa Tadeo's best-selling book is about to become your favorite new show. Based on a true story, the new Stars original series, 3 Women, stars Shailene Woodley as Gia, a grieving and struggling writer who embarks on a cross-country road trip where she meets 3 women determined to radically change their lives. This one is not to be missed. Watch the season premiere of 3 Women now, only on Stars and the Stars app.
Ah yes, the magnificent Trolley Sourbright Crawler, also known as Trollicus brightolus. The worm's captivating neon colour makes it an easy, gummy prey.
Trolley!
It's a surprisingly sour, invitingly chewy, staggeringly snackable species unlike anything else found on this planet.
Eat me!
Delicious. Visit Trolley.com to shop now.
Trolley, eat me!
The sandbox is turning into a kitchen for this episode, and while we can't feed you actual food, hopefully we can feed you some knowledge. Dianne Dotson joins me here in the sandbox to talk about food in fiction. We'll start off with an appetizer of rapid-fire questions, followed by a starter salad of literary devices, then the main course meal of food across different genres. For a little dessert, we tease a future of lab-printed food. Dianne Dotson, thank you so much for joining me on Speculative Sandbox today. I'm so excited to have you on here. For those that are just getting to know you, or even for some of your bigger fans that are following you along the podcasting tour, how about you introduce yourself and tell us about your latest project?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. As you said, I'm Dianne Dotson, but call me Dianne. I am a science fiction, fantasy, and horror author of tomorrow's release, The Shadow Galaxy, a collection of short stories and poetry out from Trepidatio Publishing, And that is my traditional publishing debut, but I'm also a hybrid author. I have 4 space opera books of the Questrazon saga, Heliopause, Ephemeris, Accretion, and Luminiferous. And I also have another upcoming debut later this year, which is my first young adult lunar punk science fiction fantasy book, The Inn at the Amethyst Lantern, out October 24th from Android Press. So I'm also a science writer and an artist, so I keep pretty busy.
Yeah, you do sound really busy. That sounds awesome. How do you handle so many projects at once?
I think I just try to portion out my day accordingly, and sometimes different days are tagged for different things. The science writing has its own deadlines, and so everything else kind of has to work around that, as well as my being a parent to 2 teens and their school schedules. So regarding the writing of fiction, I carve out the time when I can. And that's how I've always done it. When they were much younger, they would go to bed earlier, and now as they're teenagers, they don't. So I just have to kind of, pluck out that time and get it done.
I relate to that. I have 1 preteen and 1 young child, and it is hard. It's really hard to find that time. So kudos to you. You are a highly productive author, writer, and that is just an inspiration for many people who want to be able to juggle projects with their life and their family needs. So great job on that.
Oh, thank you. Just remember to take time for yourself once in a while.
Absolutely. So I have set up some rapid fire warm-up questions. That's what I've been doing this season with all of my writers. So I did not send these ahead of time, so I'm going to surprise you with them. And some of them are just general and some of them are related to today's topic. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. The first one is, what draws you most to science fiction stories?
Well, I've always loved science fiction since I was a toddler, actually. I'd watch Star Trek reruns back before we had cable. And Star Wars: A New Hope was the first movie I remember seeing on the big screen, and I was 3 when it came out. So I've always loved the possibility of science fiction, the fact that you can sort of have a taste of real world science, but then you speculate. You push out the boundaries into space, into inner space, into tiny and enormous things. And I love the scale and the scope of it. And it's a giant playground to play in as a writer. So it's definitely my favorite genre of several smaller favorites.
It seems like with sci-fi literature, it seems like it's an opportunity to be optimistic about science, but also an opportunity to be cautious about science. So which direction do you like to go?
I actually like to play in both. And sometimes I think when it comes to sort of more dystopian future stuff, I don't tend to write as much of that, but I like to dig into what can be quite scary, how things can go wrong, but I also like to bring it back to some hope. Now, in my collection that comes out tomorrow, The Shadow Galaxy, I have some pretty intense short stories in that collection. Some of them are wildly optimistic about the future, and others quite horrific. So, and I love just dancing back and forth between that and between all the subgenres. And I find that's one of the appeals of science fiction, is that you can do both.
Yes, it sounds so fun too, to be able to speculate like that and use society as like your own like action figures to speculate on what could happen.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were stuck on a desert island that had all the food, drink, and shelter you needed, so that's taken care of, what 3 things would you want?
My husband, Gareth.
Okay. Who is a wonderful, delightful man.
Yeah, he is. I want some Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And then you've said food, but dark chocolate has to be there. So I'm just going to double down on the dark chocolate.
Okay, great. So speaking of food, what is your favorite meal in real life?
Oh gosh, I love food a lot. I cook and I bake and I like to eat out. So there's a lot of foods that I would love to have if I could only pick one. It's really hard. I'd have to narrow it down to probably 3. I would probably say al pastor tacos.
I love those too. Yes.
Bengan barta, the eggplant curry.
Okay.
And tom kha, this Thai coconut soup.
That sounds amazing. All of that sounds amazing.
Absolutely.
So then switching into fiction, are there any fictional meals that you really like or would wish that you could try?
Yes, I actually write a lot about food in my books because I do love food so much. And so in the Questrazon saga, there's a lot of talk of food. In the second book, Ephemeris, there is a chef, an alien chef with several arms, and in that future in the galaxy, its chefs are luxuries, that only the most, high up people in the galaxy would ever even have a chef, because everything, of course, in the future would be sort of replicated or that sort of thing, but having an actual chef. So I really like the berry tarts that Sumond makes in Ephemeris. I would want those little purple tarts. And then other foods in fiction that I would love. I always loved the lunch pail tree in the Oz books, in Ozma of Oz by L. Frank Baum, where Dorothy is, I think it's in the land of Ev, which is one of the lands surrounding the land of Oz. And she plucks down this lunch pail tree, and it's got your whole kit of lunch inside of it that's just like blooming on the tree when Stripey pick it. So I always loved that. And I read the Little House books as a kid by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and I would get really hungry reading about pancakes in a blizzard.
Oh yeah.
I used to like to, I would try to make pancakes to go with that whenever to reread, the Long Winter book, about that. So those are some of my favorite foods in fiction.
I love fiction where the food grows off plants, like surroundings, but not like in its raw form. But like if you could just like pluck a completed meal, almost like Willy Wonka, I guess, the chocolate.
Yeah. It's just highly ideal.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up, since a lot of people have been talking about it. Have you had a chance to see The Menu, the movie The
Not yet.
Menu?
It's on my list to see. Like
Okay.
that is one of my top movies I want to watch in the next couple of weeks with Gareth. So
Okay. Highly, highly recommend because it's got some
okay.
chilling kind of, perspectives on, but it
Food
does
horror.
go into like, what does food mean for the individual, for the society, for art? So, okay, then I won't go into any further than that. I don't want to spoil anything. All right. My last warm up is if you were Alice in Wonderland, would you readily follow the directions of eat this and drink this?
Smell it first. If it smelled good, I'd be, yeah, maybe I'll do it. Why not?
Mhm.
But if it
Okay.
smelled bad, I'm not doing it.
Yes. Okay. So today we're talking, I feel like I've warmed us up and maybe we're hungry and maybe our listeners are hungry at this point.
Definitely.
Our topic today is food and fiction. So to get us started, tell me what interested you in this topic.
Well, I've always had a strong interest in food. I grew up in East Tennessee, and the place where I grew up that my parents had for much of my childhood until they moved back to the town had a big plot of land, and we would garden. And my parents would garden, we had a big garden. We also had, because my grandmother had planted a lot of wonderful plants and trees there. We had pecan trees, we had cherry trees, we had all these different fruits and vegetables, and there would be wild blackberries, and I would go blackberry picking along the railroad tracks close to my house. So I was always kind of taking in whatever I could from my surroundings. And I loved food and fiction, like I said about the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, that I often would be inspired to cook. I learned how to bake at a pretty early age. I remember I was part of like a biscuit making competition for 4-H as in my grade school.
Oh,
And
cool. I didn't
then
know they did that. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it was really fun. And then later, was it like eighth grade that we had home ec, and we had to prepare an entire meal, like full course, and ours was the best. And like I remember, I kind of just took over everybody because they hadn't baked like I did or make candy, because I also was a candy maker as a young teen.
Ooh, okay.
My parents really loved this, by the way. So, but I took over my team, and I was like, we're gonna do this and this and this. I was like a little chef, and we had the best meal. And then later, after college, I had gone through a lot of turmoil, and I had to move back to my hometown after getting a science degree. And I had the only job I could get was at a restaurant, and it was like it was a two-faceted restaurant. Like during the day, it was like a deli and a barbecue, and in the night, it was fine dining. So I did all of that, and I really dug into my love for feeding people and learning catering, which is something I've always liked to do. I always provided chocolate colored strawberries to friends, like at their weddings, and stuff like that. So I just really dug deep into food, and most of what I read that is nonfiction is cookbooks.
Oh, yes. I love
A
cookbooks.
lot of food bloggers, and I have for decades. And so the food has always kind of just been there as sort of a piece of my world building, because I'm always thinking about food.
Yes.
I'm basically a hobbit crossed with an elf.
So if you were to create your own food truck right now, what would it be?
Oh my God. Okay. Well, it'd have to have tacos,
Okay.
al pastor, but also vegetarian and vegan versions. And so in addition to that, I would have probably a lot of my baked goods, like my double chocolate brownies, which at tomorrow's book launch, I'm bringing those to San Diego, because I always have my book signing brownies. And everybody's always like, oh, are they special brownies? I'm like, I know what you're saying, but they're special because I made them.
Yes, they're special with love.
So yeah, and then I would have probably some Southern stuff, like really good fluffy biscuits. I would probably have cake, and I love pie, so there'd be pies. I'd probably do some nice soups in the winter, and things that you can carry that are not hard to travel with to eat. I love burritos. So I would have like the best, most delicious food truck, and I would have some kind of fun drinks. I would have smoothies, and I'd have juices, probably inspired by some of my science fiction fantasies.
Ooh, that would be so fun. I would love to see a food truck that was like literature, book related. Where they, I should start one in my region, because that would be amazing.
Ooh,
okay,
good.
as a writer, then as a creative, what would you call your food truck?
Ooh, okay. Let me think about this for a second.
You're like Dianne's devilishly delicious delights.
Oh, let's see. Probably, I don't know that it would be a really food related title, but it'd probably be, um,
Would it be more abstract, more, or maybe it's like a play on words?
maybe Stars and Cakes.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
It sounds, I would want to go there and eat some cake.
Yeah.
Okay, so you told me when we were emailing back and forth on a topic that you wrote an article about food and fiction. I would love to know what that article was about.
Yeah. So this is on Medium. Anybody can read it. It's Let's Talk About Food in Science Fiction and Fantasy. And I dug into different classic books. For example, of course, Lord of the Rings comes to mind for fantasy because you have Limbas, the elvish waybread. You have the hobbits constantly obsessing about food, which is highly relatable to me. Food and beer and just all that. And Tolkien goes into such detail about all these different foods that his characters have. And it makes that world, Middle Earth, seem so lived in and so relatable. And then, of course, when food scarcity comes later, when Frodo and Sam are in Mordor, and all they have left is that limbus, which, as hobbits is really not the best food in the world, but it sustains them. I thought that was a powerful metaphor for, scarcity and wartime. And I know that was highly relevant in World War I, which, Tolkien was part of. So in addition to that, I talked about, I think I mentioned His Dark Materials because the cocoa scene, with Mrs. Coulter luring the kids,
Yes.
as the head gobbler of the General Oblation Board, luring kids with cocoa. Then, of course, Dune. I talked about Dune because they mentioned that melange, the spice, tastes like cinnamon. And so there's that. And then, of course, the fact that on a desert planet like Arrakis, you have such another scarcity situation, right? Where you've no water except what you can reclaim from your own body or from precious little in the atmosphere. I even liked that about Star Wars with like blue milk and things like that, but also moisture farming and all of these little things add up to really good world building. And of course, I mentioned Oz with the lunch pail tree, but also there is a fairy that befriends Dorothy and Ozma later named Polychrome, and she's the rainbow's daughter. And the sky fairies, they don't consume food like we do. So she subsists on mist cakes and cloud buns.
Oh.
And dewdrops. Like one dewdrop, like she's our size, right? But like one dewdrop and she's good. She's good for like days. So I just love all these different ways of thinking about food and characters and world building.
That sounds so efficient. Like I wish, especially when you're in like a writer's high and you're getting things done and like you don't want to stop and eat sometimes. Like if I could just have a dewdrop that will sustain me for a day, that'd be fantastic.
Same. But it was a really fun exploration of how to build that into the worlds. And I talked a bit about the Quest Razon saga and about the tarts, but I also pie keeps coming up as kind of a theme. There's a character named Meredith, and she always offers pie as comfort. And it's one of the few things that she can make on Mandira Research Station at the edge of our solar system. And then when things get more galactic, you get these exotic foods. And then eventually it becomes a family heritage situation where one of her descendants kind of takes up the mantle that she had and makes all these wonderful things. And then there's like different pastries that are mentioned. There's different drinks. There's a drink called silka, which is a sort of a kind of like a mix between coffee and yerba mate and sort of a caffeinated, sort of curryish kind of drink.
Oh, interesting.
And then I talk about how, because I like to lean into ecology and how different plants survive in different conditions, and environments. I talk a little bit about that in my books too. So it's fun world building.
Would you say you're a sweet or savory person?
I mean, historically, I've been a sweet tooth, like notorious in my family, but later in life, I'm enjoying more savory foods, partly because I am cooking a lot and going outside of my comfort realm and trying new things. And also now that I'm living in Los Angeles, I have like the best food on the planet right outside my door. And so I'm able to try all these different cuisines and extremely fresh produce that's grown super locally. And so, I've become more savory.
Gotcha.
But I will always break for pie, brownies, cookies and cake. And I tend to make all of those things throughout the year. And holidays are an extravaganza for me. I go all the way out, just all the way out.
That's awesome. Okay, so then for writers that want to incorporate food into their stories, I did some quick digging real quick before, like when I was prepping for this interview, and I saw a couple like categorizations as far as why people use food in fiction. And I wanted to read them, and then I wanted to get your input on them, and we can like unpack each of them. So
Okay.
one was to ground a work, because taste is one of our 5 primary senses.
Right.
And so food imagery can make the most crazy seem familiar. There's to connect characters as they break bread,
Right.
to also educate on different cultures. And then sometimes food is used as a tool, like pomegranate seeds, keeping Demeter Hellside for half the year, or the
Right.
drink in the food in Alice in Wonderland to change her shape. But some examples of, getting speculative with different cultures, what you were saying with the milk in The Last Jedi, Rey and the inflating bread in The Force
Yeah.
Awakens, and then the Death
Portions.
Day
Yeah.
party in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, where everything's kind of like decaying on the table, but that's how ghosts pretend to consume food. So yeah, what are your thoughts on like those deliberate uses of food as a tool?
I think it's a really fun topic. And I use, well, technically a drink as a tool in my books to kind of underline how vulnerable a character is or isn't. Because, you talk about Alice in Wonderland is like drinking something that transforms her, right? And becomes important to the plot and how she can get to different places. But it also kind of underlines vulnerability of a character. And I use that in my books with the character Galadea is essentially ageless and very powerful while being innocent at the same time. But someone finds out, or she finds out accidentally, that there is a drink that will cause her great disarray, and it's called Strophe liqueur, and it's this brilliant ultramarine blue drink, and only 2 beings in the entire galaxy make it. But if you were to drink it as a human, it'd make you feel a little bit good, kind of fuzzy, but not as strong as it. But for her, it kind of warps everything for her and is disruptive. So it's used against her on a couple of occasions, and then to help her on another, to try to test whether or not that it is really her, because she's the only person who reacts that way in the whole galaxy to this drink. So it's a weird plot point to use the Strophe liqueur. And I like using food as like a test or a plot point, because I mean, it's a choice, right? It's a point of agency, except in the case of Gala, that on occasion she was slipped this drink, not knowing what it was going to do to her at the time. So, but I like it when there is a choice that you have to drink this drink in order to do this, or you have to, consume this seed in order to survive or subsist. I think it's a fun thing to do, because we think about things that we can eat or not eat that affect our lives. Some people have food allergies, and it's like you have to be incredibly careful. But like in terms of like getting to a goal, it seems like food, because it is something we have to survive. I think having a choice is a point in which we realize we are beyond scarcity, right? Like you can choose to consume something. That means you have that choice, which is not always the case for humans,
Yeah. It seems like food in many cases can take on a magical element, especially when it can change who you are or give you powers for a little bit of time. And actually last week's episode on magic systems, they talked about in the, oh gosh, I'm going to forget what it's called, but there's like magical beings that drink metal. It's the Brandon Sanderson books, Mistborn, the Mistborn books. You drink metal, and then that allows you to control metal. And it's all based off of like what you drink. And because it's a finite resource, it's like it's limiting. I always think that's really interesting how conscious we are and how much we as a society truly love food because it's used so often as a tool.
Right. It is.
Do you think, okay, what I wanted to come up with some cool genres and kind of workshop with you. What kind of food would you expect to see in these certain settings? Okay. Medieval fantasy.
Probably a giant stein of some kind of beer.
Okay. And how would you differentiate the everyday people? What would they eat and drink versus the wealthy?
I think the everyday people would have food mostly that they've grown or that in their close communities have grown, like they're very much in tune with the seasons. They can't get exotic spices by and large. So it'd be simple fare that's hearty,
Okay.
stews and breads, home brewed beer, anything that can be made from what they have or can trade for. And then, the more royal or sort of, elite, they would be able to get food from faraway places and spices and sugars and things like that. And they would have elaborate, because they're not doing the cooking, they're not doing the baking. So someone else, an entire staff downstairs is taking care of all that and making, daintier foods and, aged wines that are from special grapes or something or some other fruit, and special ciders that couldn't be got elsewhere. So for them, it's, they don't break bread the same way, as, the down home folk would do. It's for them, it's a status thing.
Yes. And sticking with medieval for a little bit, just simply because it keeps us on earth for a minute, with my list. How should a writer consider ecologies or geographic location when it comes to establishing the food in their story?
Well, ecology, I like to talk about ecology and world building. I had a Science Fiction Writers Association article in which I do that very thing for science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And you have to think about where can food grow versus not. And for wine lovers, appellations are areas of where different wine grapes can grow, and that it has to do with the slope, the sun angle, the climate, and all these different factors that can give the wine terroir, or like just a unique flavor that could only be got there. And the same thing can happen with dairy milk, like cows consuming a certain kind of grass, like on the Oregon coast, their milk tastes very different from, a factory farm cow milk, that's given, processed grains or whatever. So having to think about that, you have to consider that world building involves thinking about where you're at and what can survive. And so it's a challenge to our characters. If you can only get a certain kind of food a certain kind of year, isn't it an agrarian society? Can they be permanently there? Would they benefit? Will their orchards grow fruit in this one slope, or do they need it on another slope where there's better sun and better drainage? Do they need pollinators that can only help their nut trees grow? And so do they have beehives or whatever other pollination factors in? And so ecology plays a massive role in that situation.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it makes me think about how different conditions can set you up for different successes or failures. Where I live, for example, the ground is really hard, and we can get a couple of rainfalls in a week, but then it'll saturate the ground, and then at that point the rain just slides along the ground, which creates a lot of flash flooding.
Right.
And
that happens here too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so sometimes, like when there's flooding and things are just sliding on, like it's difficult to grow in that area because everything is just like moving, right? So we have washes in these areas and you can never build in there. And it's always interesting to think like, okay, when you're building a medieval or, community and there's geographic impacts to it, being able to consider, okay, what are all those little causes and effects that could actually affect the food industry?
Right. Yeah.
What are some failures like that you can build in that can impact the food industry? I mean, I weather is an obvious one, but is there anything else?
Yeah, natural disasters come to mind. Like obviously if you have a place where you get flash floods or snowstorms and you're limited to, or frosts, like a deep freeze situation where you have this horrible freeze and it ruins your crops, or blight, things like that. Different sort of pests that can come along and eat everything, or like microorganisms that are detrimental, invasive species that come in.
Yes. Or like poison gets into the water supply.
Yeah. And any sort of toxic runoff that could be naturally caused or otherwise, so if it was like a medieval fantasy and there was a volcano eruption and the runoff came downstream and killed fish in the stream, ruined the crops, so all these different things could factor in and affect your food supply and your drinking water supply.
Interesting. So when diving into like the magical application of food, I think of Harry Potter, where they just kind of, I forgot what the spell, I don't even know if they said the spell in the book, but they just wave their wand and they make food appear. But I think that there was like a concept that you can't create something from nothing. But what are your thoughts on when like magic is used to create food from nothing or to just create food in general?
Well, I think magic is, I don't, we always like to talk about magic in science fiction is technology that hasn't been invented yet. And so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have a color. So since you can't create or destroy matter, if you're using magic, the way I would think of it is like you're drawing from material in your surroundings on Earth or Middle Earth or wherever it is. And so you're invoking an arrangement of that into food. It's almost like a magical replicator.
Interesting. Yeah, then I'm like, will we be 3D printing food one day? And I mean, I know.
We already are.
Oh, but tell me about that. What do you know about that?
So as I recall, this was going to be something that was tested on the International Space Station, that you could 3D print things, but we're 3D printing foods kind of at a rudimentary level right now. And the goal, though, is to eventually be able to 3D print, great protein sources like a steak, so that you don't have to take it from an animal, right? You would print a steak, out of raw materials and get as close to that as you can. So eventually we will basically have replicators. It's not an unfeasible thing. It is a possible thing where you draw upon resources and you make something out of it, so that's kind of what we're looking at now. And I think, on a smaller scale and a modern scale, like you can go to these different fast food restaurants and you can pick whatever flavor of Sprite or whatever
Yes.
you want. Like, hey, I'm going to mix it up today. It's going to be cherry, lime, grape. Let's go hog wild. And so like that would have been miraculous even, 50 years ago, to just be able to press some buttons and make that, right? So we would have been like, yes. But so it's coming. These are things that we can do,
That leads me to the next setup, which is space operas. So how do you feed your people on a spaceship? Would it have to be through a tool like that? Are there other ways that people have explored food production?
So on a spaceship, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you can't dock, that's a whole different situation than if you're at this really self-sustaining area that's like, got all the shops and cafes and food supplies. So think of it like in heliopause, where I have a space station at the edge of the solar system. They don't get a supply run all that often. And even our International Space Station, we have to send food up, right? They're not growing enough in capacity. They do grow some food, but you can't really, sustain yourself on that. So we have to send food there. There's other communities on Earth where you have to, export and import a lot of stuff just to be able to survive. But a contained spaceship is going to need to be super sustainable. So you would need, you'd need the potential for food storage, but I think you'd also would have to be able to generate, 3D print, replicate, whatever you want to call food from just common materials that you could get. And so, maybe your ship comes pre-programmed with a set of organic chemicals, and it just mixes those and makes those for you. Has to be sustainable. You want to be able to travel and not dock for a long time in case something goes wrong. You want it to be, if the power goes down, you still need a food backup of some kind. You would need food storage, for like MREs, like meals ready to eat, like the military have, right? So,
I think of astronaut food too, like a little
exactly.
packet of food.
Dried, dehydrated food. If you can add water, you're good.
Is it better to go in the direction of replicated food, or can you go into the world of like recreating farmland but on a spaceship? Is that even possible? Because you would need sunlight, but I guess you could fabricate that.
Yeah, you could. And that's something else I did with Mandela Research Stations. It has a conservatory in which you can grow plants and fungi and have those as part of your food source, in addition to sort of generating and 3D printing and also like long-term storage foods like energy bars and things like that. So you have a range of nutritional sources. And I think it is important to have, if you have the space, and that is a limiting factor. If you have a space station, you probably got the space to have some plants and whatnot. But on a small spaceship, you would be very limited into what you could grow. And so it's less than ideal for that, And then you'd want to be able to dock somewhere and get a fresh supply of produce.
Yeah, 'cause I was thinking if you had a lot of you know how we talk about now with produced food and how it's having an effect on people's health. And I was reading about colorectal cancer spiking in younger ages. And I'm not sure what the causes are, but they're talking about like a lot of it could be linked to just the increase in processed foods and access to, processed foods. So I imagine like whatever we come up with as a food source may have some sort of domino effect on healthcare, or at least our physical health in the story.
Maybe, but I would hope, because it's already kind of happening, that we would have an AI situation that would be able to recognize if a food is causing you short or long-term harm. You would know that immediately.
I would love that. I want that
It's going to
now.
happen. It will happen. I mean, this is being worked on. So like I can't keep up with this stuff because as a science writer, that's the other facet of my job. There's some bleed through. And I keep up with, tailored medical care and solutions to food problems. So that's just a playground in which we can all participate, because we're going to see it happening before too much longer, in which we will know how things affect our body in real time. And
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I would love that. That would
yeah,
that would answer so many questions.
right. So I would project that in the future you would know, so we would also, if we have the ability to know how a food is going to affect you, then you could potentially have food sources that you could print that would be directly tailored to your own nutritional and genetic needs, that you have a propensity for, this particular condition, or you do have this existing condition, then you get a food that's generated to be able to work with your body. Like, say you're lactose intolerant, that's a no-brainer. You'd have food that's no lactose in it. Or, I don't know, maybe we edit those genes in the future and we don't need to worry about that. But I definitely think tailored food, tailored medicine is a future thing that we would have on spaceships that would travel. So because if you already got the tech to be able to be out in space, you've definitely got the tech to take care of the food.
So that's such an optimistic future. So just to play now, what would the scary side of that be?
Well, obviously, it could be weaponized. Someone could figure out what your weakness is, and if they didn't get you by another mean, if they wanted to be extremely subtle, or be able to control you in some way, then they could potentially slowly poison you, or trick you, or weaken you, or something like that.
It'd be like when you try to take down your enemy by poisoning like the chili that the
right. Or like if you wanted to, it's like for Superman having kryptonite. Like if you had just this little bitty thing that would just definitely be somebody's undoing, and not enough to take them out, but to control them, because it's often about control, right? So.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I hope no evil
write
dictators are
villains.
listening right now. Okay. Moving right along. I think we're doing good on time. Post-apocalypse. What do you do about food in the post-apocalypse?
Whew. Well, I guess if you're Mad Max, you look for dog food cans. That was one thing that always struck me as good world building for Mad Max, Road Warrior, back in the 80s when I first watched those movies. And I was like, that's actually brilliant. I mean, if you could find it, you're golden. So any shelf stable food that you could find would be a good thing. But if not, you're going to have to grow it. There's no way around it. So in that case, we wouldn't have the tech to produce the food for us. We have to go back to our agrarian roots and figure it out.
It's always interesting because I always think, like a lot of dystopian societies kind of represent the fall of society, or like the rise of an oppressive thing. But I always think like, and then in the case of what is it called, where all the boys are dumped on an island, the plane crash on the island, and they just chaos kind of takes over them. Yeah. I'm forgetting the title at the moment because anyway,
I mean, that covers like multiple things. That covers like Lord of the Flies. It covers Lost. It covers like all that sort of genre, like
right.
Murder islands with limited resources.
Yes, but I always think
about that.
I definitely, you see cases today where like what we're taking is we're mirroring like scary situations from around the world and placing them in these circumstances. But I also think about like where we came from and how we got to a place, and we're able to create the governments that we have and the societies that we have, and nothing is perfect, of course. But the optimistic turn is, what if people actually just kind of figured it back out again. Like when you destroy an anthill and they just rebuild it, like the apocalypse for them was when you stepped on it, but they just rebuilt it and everything's good again.
Well, that's
So,
what we've done throughout history. We've started over and over after multiple disasters.
mhm.
That's just what we do. In a post-apocalyptic situation, to our frame of thought right now, I mean, that's happened throughout history. History's had its apocalyptic moments and wiped out whole civilizations, because of resource destruction or whatever, volcanic event, super droughts, all these kinds of things. It's already happened. So obviously, like, we are survivors, we will figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then I had some other ideas, but I didn't know how useful they were. But in the horror genre, what can writers do to play with food?
Well, oftentimes you're the prey.
Ooh.
I talk about that in that world building article in ecology. I said, in an ecological system, we have a food chain, right? We have an apex predator, and then we have various forms of prey, and then we have, like plants at the bottom, right? So at the top, you have like the eagle or the tiger or the human. And so in the case of horror, your apex predator is the villain, the monster, the slasher, and it can either directly go after you for food, aka a vampire or similar, or it can go after your whole way of life and anything like that, and or can consume your soul. It's consuming something, it's attacking you, it's taking your resources, it's taking your life potentially. So it's the apex predator in this situation. And oftentimes when it comes to food in horror, if you're not the food, then something like your blood is the food,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So, or your brain, if you've got the zombie thing going on, your brain is the food. There's cannibalism, there's it's all kinds of. Horror is great because you can just, anything can be the predator or the prey or some intermingling. Of course, like in Alien, you have this predator, this apex predator running loose on the ship, just picking everybody off, for its Scooby snacks. And then the actual predator, the movie, of course, is a hunter. So then that's a situation of, it's like, are they doing it for sport? Or are they doing it for survival? Of course, predator does it for sport, but would have originally done it for survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an apex predator. So then an alien doing it just needs to survive, needs to reproduce, needs to be able to, subsist. And of course, yeah.
I'm so impressed by how quick you are. I honestly didn't know, like, with the horror thing, because when I first came up with the idea for horror, I was like thinking, oh, Pan's Labyrinth, they had food on the table. But like,
then there's the poison aspect, right? Like where
mm-hmm.
you could kill people, that's another facet of it too. But yeah, it's either you're the prey directly or you become the prey, so that's the food dynamic there. And you can play in it, like poisonous wine, blood, all these different things, like slowly starving, like sucking the life force out of you or whatever. So you can go hog wild with that.
I'm just like, I'm a little blown away. That didn't even occur to me when you're like, we're the food. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. We are the food. Okay, so my favorite thing to do is buy recipe books that are inspired by movies, TV shows, books, and games. And I currently have one that's the unofficial Legend of Zelda cookbook by
Awesome.
Amy. I have to drop that. It's the best cookbook I've ever had. So have you tried any recipes from a movie, TV show, book, or game?
I have, and I actually wrote an article about this kind of cookbook that is online somewhere. I could provide the link. I went down through several cookbooks that are genre related. But when I was growing up and I was reading the Little House books, I was also reading the Anne of Green Gables books. And I was obsessed. Like, there's a lot of talk about food and drink in those too. So I ended up buying a cookbook for like the Little House cookbook and then the Anne of Green Gables cookbook, so that I could make the things that I was reading about. I love that kind of stuff. And then like later, like you can make, there's like a dune, like a melange, like a spice cookie that you can make. So I love stuff like that,
It's so fun, especially when you're doing it for like a watching party, like
right.
Game of Thrones watch party. It's fun.
Right. There's some really great cookbooks related to that, so
awesome.
I love stuff like that. And I've been asked, like, would you ever do a cookbook based on your work? So I'm like, absolutely I would, because I've actually made a cookbook before, but it was like a community cookbook. Because like I said before, my favorite nonfiction thing to read is cookbooks. So like probably eventually I will make a cookbook of some kind. And
Would it be an ordinary cookbook though? Or would it be like stories and
I
other
would
things?
I would probably have at least some anecdotes. Like I would have a genre one, right?
Okay.
Speculative fiction cookbook, but I would also have a cultural one because I grew up in Southern Appalachia and I know a lot of food lore from that region. I might have one specific to that. I might have one that's West Coast US specific because I really dug into that when I moved west in 2000 and I've not looked back. And I'm all about like where is this, where can you get these locally produced things you can't get anywhere else? Like where can you get Marion berries? Where can you get a certain kind of ice wine in the Northwest? Where can you get certain kinds of almonds in the Central Valley of California? What grows on the coast? So that's the ecology and the food lover coming back and forth with me and figuring out all these special foods that you can't get anywhere else, special cheeses, special whatever, that it's just totally unique to every food region. And so I think of food as tourism in a lot of ways.
You mentioned food lore. Do you know one that you could share off the top of your head?
Food what?
Food lore from the
So,
Appalachian region.
we had there's a lot, but like biscuits are a big deal. So there's the whole Rocky Top, the song Rocky Top, which my alma mater, University of Tennessee, sings it at all the football games. Good old Rocky Top. But in that song, it says corn won't grow at all on Rocky Top rocks. Dirt's too rocky by far. So that's kind of true that like Appalachia was like this set of islands of communities that really weren't, except in the river valleys, like on the hills and the hollers, not ideal for growing much, because it was hard land to till. So you would subsist on whatever you could, right? And so there's a lot of, so the thing about Southern Appalachia is like there's an incredible number of endemic plant species there. It's incredibly species rich. A lot of people know that. But there are a lot of fascinating, unique plants, fungi, the whole works that you can have there that are nowhere else. And so one of the trees that my ancestors would have would be pawpaw, which is sort of a papaya-like fruit. And it's not super shelf stable. So that's why I don't see it mass market. You would get it there and it was sweet. And that was part of the food they ate. They ate a lot of pecans in the South and then various nuts and then muscadine grapes. You would later get some invasive species like kudzu, but you can actually eat the leaves of kudzu that are young in a salad. Flowers and roots were a big deal. Sassafras roots, leading eventually to like root beer. And
that's where it comes from.
Yeah, so it's actually based off of roots, and sassafras is one of them. And I remember when I was a kid, I would pluck the leaves of sassafras and chew on the stem, and it's like the sweet taste. So so in the Shadow Galaxy, there's a section on Appalachia and later in the book. And one of them is a nonfiction piece talking about sourwood honey days and how I would go with my father and we would go up into the mountains, like Grandfather Mountain. And there would be stands of like candy apples and for other fruits and jams, but there would be sourwood honey. And it only comes from there because of the sourwood tree, the blossoms of that, the bees go for that. And it's a highly unique honey. It's not like any other honey. So you can only get it there. And Dad would just make that his whole thing every year. Go get the honey for the year, up in there. So there's sourwood honey and biscuits, like we used to have, some people call it cat head biscuits because like biscuits as big as a cat's head,
So when I think of biscuits, I think of two things. I think of the warm, fluffy ones that you eat with gravy, or I think of the British cookie.
Right.
Is that what this is? Okay.
Having a British husband, we've been learning back and forth. And so I grew up in East Tennessee and I've had biscuits and gravy my entire life. I've made a lot of biscuits. And we're talking about the fluffy.
Okay.
They look like a lightweight scone, but it's not a scone and it's not a cookie, so and that's definitely a thing. Like that whole area is very much into the biscuits. And there's another thing called country ham, which is sort of Southern Appalachia's version of Parma, I suppose. It's an incredibly salty preserved ham, and they would slice off, and I apologize to all vegetarians, but it is part of the lore. Is like you would have country ham and biscuits and gravy. Other things that would be in the area, gosh, there's a lot of wild berries. That kind of figures into a lot of the stories I write about that area, because I grew up next to a train track that was just the banks were coated with blackberries. And so I would go and do a big blackberry, picking session in the summer. And we just had loads of them. We would can them, or we would use them in cobblers, or we would freeze a bunch of them for later in the year. So,
Wow.
you live off the land still to this day. And then, there's like Granger County tomatoes in East Tennessee, in Hawkins County, magnificent heirloom quality Granger County tomatoes. Nothing else like it anywhere. The best tomatoes on earth. So, it's just, there's a lot of food heritage there that I could talk about all day, literally.
That's so nice. If I tried to go collect berries off of the local bushes here, I think I might die.
It wasn't super pleasant because it would always be the hottest time of the year and tons of mosquitoes. But you would have to dress like long sleeves, long pants, because you get scratched up to death,
Yeah.
But the berries would be like, and then it's just enormous. And
that's amazing. And edible. Yeah. The berries we have out here are poisonous.
These are big blackberries. They're great. Once in a while you'd get raspberries, but that was less common. They didn't do quite as well in that heat. So
wow, that's amazing. Well, this was an amazing discussion for me. You were so knowledgeable. I loved hearing from you. Do you have any final remarks on food in fiction?
I would say that so many of us have food memories and things that brought us comfort or connect to a part of our lives. If you can incorporate a food memory, even if you're twisting it so that it is this wholly new food, do that in your fiction, because readers really pick up on that and respond. We bond to that, as part of our shared history. And, you got to eat to live, but at the same time, it really helps flesh out your world to have food be a big part of it.
That's wonderful. And how can our listeners follow you?
I am pretty much universally at Dianne Dotson on social media, with one exception. So that's JDIANNE.DOTSON, Twitter, Instagram, most places. My Facebook page is at Dianne Dotson Writer. My website is jdiannedotson.com. And remember, that's Dianne with 2 N's. And yeah, so I'm out there. Come find me, come follow me. I've got a book out tomorrow, and then more books coming, and exciting stuff happening. And I love to talk about fiction, and I love to talk about food. So happy to do it.
Speculative Sandbox is a volunteer-run podcast that relies on the collaboration of fellow creators like you. Join the conversation and participate in fun polls and questionnaires on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Interested in being in a future episode? Our DMs are open, or you can email speculativesandbox@gmail.com.